Why is it that if we're doing chin-ups and dips on the rings, we start to shake, we feel weak, and we're failing reps? If you're having this issue, then this video is for you. I've coached hundreds of people through this process, and today I'm going to outline a case study from one of these people. Abby has kindly allowed me to share some of the information from her practice and how we're helping her on that journey. So first of all, when Abby came to me for coaching, she had a number of different goals, one of which was to get the ring muscle up. When we first tested her, she had no dip experience, so vertical pushing with the arms driving down towards the feet. So that was one key area of weakness. The other was that she had a decent repetition or two of the chin up on a bar, but then again, she had no experience on this unstable surface of the rings. So we had to work with this iterative process of allowing her to get enough experience on an unstable surface, such as the rings, in the relevant movement patterns, but also basically get her base area of capacity higher, get her strength up without too much volatility. Therefore, the initial part of our process was basically to get her strong. And over the course of 3 to 4 phases, we improved her chin-ups to 8 repetitions without any added load. And we even allowed her to work up to a 12.5 kilo 1 RM. That's somewhere in the region of 25 to 30% of her body weight, which is an amazing achievement. We also began a process of improving her general capacity in pushing. We worked on push-ups and weighted push-ups, trying to get her baseline as high as possible. Ultimately, we began working with the rings, but there was something that she struggled with that I'm going to talk about. So basically what happened is when we transitioned over to the rings fully, and we looked at our 2 primary movements, the chin up and the dip, she came to me and she said, "Will, I'm flabbergasted. I've gone from 8 reps on the bar of a chin up and I'm now struggling to do even 1 rep. What happens? It felt like overnight I simply lost all of my strength." So I tried to explain that this is not uncommon and there are multiple reasons as to why this happens. So the key issues and limitations of people moving from stabilized objects such as the bar or a box that we're doing dips and pull-ups on and moving over to the rings. Essentially what's happening is one of Newton's laws. Every force has an opposite and equal reactive force. So as I pull down on a bar, there's also a force reacting to me. And because the bar is nice and strong, nice and sturdy, I sense that it's very strong and sturdy and my nervous system allows full power. When I do the same thing on the rings, however, I do have an opposite and equal force, but I also have an ability for the ring to go in all different directions. And that means my body and my nervous system perceives a slight threat or risk in giving full power. And therefore, we have to learn to control and coordinate and stabilize in order to get that same positive feedback loop as we do on the bar. It means there's far more volatility in a given movement, meaning the body has to stabilize and apply co-contractions in order to apply force in the direction that we wish to. And this is where we get to key point number 2, which is the neurological inefficiency, or basically the skill aspect of any given movement. If we're moving from a closed kinetic chain through the phases to an open kinetic chain, we have to treat each of these phases as a new skill, a new coordination of the body and the musculature in order to produce the desired outcome. If we don't get this quite correct, we're going to run into ourselves and almost fight ourselves through these patterns. And this is where we have this kind of shaking happening where the body's trying to coordinate and stabilize the movement because it knows what you want to do. You've done this pattern before on a stable surface, but it can't coordinate all of the different muscles and supporting structures in order to fulfill the given task. And that's where you start to feel weak. The body kind of limits you and says, you know what, I don't feel safe here. There's a negative feedback loop and I can't produce this force. It doesn't mean that you lost the strength. It simply means that your nervous system is out to protect you and you need to understand the skill to coordinate the body for it to feel safe. The perceived threat is lower and therefore you can move forward. And this is a really important distinction. You didn't lose strength or power. You simply haven't learned how to stabilize and coordinate in order to produce maximum power in the first place. Once you do this, you're really going to feel the huge difference. You're going to feel a sense of control and efficiency in the movement as you did on the stable surface. Then we have key point number 3, which is basically the psychological component, the mental component. And that's basically the fear and apprehension that we build up when we feel like we've lost something that we had before. Now, hopefully key points 1 and 2 really help us here. If we see this not as something that we've lost, but rather something that we can seek to learn as new, we can start to flip the negative into a positive and feel excited about the novelty of what's to learn. Now, it is difficult when we feel like we can do something, but we fail. But it's really important to try and see this as a new adaptation and really adding a bit of juice to the body, adding a bit of physical intelligence to our structure, rather than only performing simple closed kinetic chain type movement patterns. And starting to add these kind of open movement patterns that have a lot more complexity, we can start to really have quite an interesting practice that allows us to adapt for a longer period of time, becoming more durable and physically intelligent. So let's bring Abby back into the mix and let's start to look at what we've been doing with her to help her move from the bar to the rings and overcome this feeling of losing everything. So solution number one is to isolate and remove key aspects that we're struggling with, basically weak links, strengthen them in order to make them less weak, and then obviously reintegrate them into the desired movement pattern. So one of the key differences to understand when we're looking at the bar chin-up versus the ring chin-up is that the hands on the bar cannot move horizontally, i.e. away or closer, but on the rings, they very much can. And this is a huge issue because if we cannot stabilize the rings towards each other, i.e. with horizontal adduction, basically squeezing the hands towards the body, we can't produce force in the angle or the force vector that we wish to. So if we can try and isolate this and improve it, we can start to really help the ring chin-up. So what we did with Abby is we looked at straight arm pull downs with a slight inward trajectory. Pulling inwards towards the body really helps engage the horizontal abduction as we move into extension of the shoulder. And number two, something like a pec fly, where we're getting the pec involved in squeezing the arm towards the center of the body. These are the actions that we want to try and have when we're performing the ring chin-up. Something I love to say, and I'm sure you've seen this before, is basically squeeze the orange. What I'm basically trying to say to the student in a kind of metaphor or task is horizontally adduct and connect the arm to the torso. Next time you're doing a chin-up or a ring chin-up, try to imagine squeezing the orange for all it's worth, and I promise you the force from the hands will transition through the arms into the body and you'll feel just that little bit stronger. The next solution we've been looking at is utilizing eccentrics. So research suggests that eccentric phases of motion, that's basically muscle lengthening under load, is between 120 and 160% stronger than concentric, i.e. shortening under load. Now this is really significant because I can be doing something that's 20 to 60% harder than my current 1RM or my current working level and get a bit more time, a bit more practice in something that feels too hard for me to do a full repetition of. Basically, lowering down the negative part of a chin-up on the rings can really help get a bit of time and attention and allow the body to soak up all of the stabilization cues and coordinations that it needs in order to adapt. So eccentrics are fantastic if you can recover from them. The next solution, I'm sorry, it's a boring one, but it's always incredibly important, and I'm going to say it over and over and over again, progressive overload principles. Always seek to progress slowly and steadily forward. If one week you did 3 of something, next week do 4, and then 5, and then 6, and build your puzzle step by step, build your pyramid step by step. Form that big base, and gradually over time, place more and more stimulus, more and more adaptation potential on top. Basically, when it comes to working on any of these progressions, just try and make them slightly harder every single time you do them, and over time you will progress. It's really that simple. The key for a coach is basically allow the student to find the easiest way to progressively overload everything relevant to what they want to do moving forwards. That's it. If you can adhere to a program that allows you to progressively overload and you can recover from that, you will progress. That's it. The next solution is then lowering the leverage and lowering the volatility of progressions in accessory movements. So rather than only working on the ring chin-up and failing, we also did a lot of work on the ring row and trying to gradually overload the ring row because it's a little bit harder than a normal row, but it's not as hard as the ring chin-up. So it allows a nice progression that we can get a lot more time and attention and progressive overload. And the final key solution is the mindset switch of trying to treat this as a new skill. It is the same movement pathway, but it's also different in the body. The signals and the muscle contractions that we have to perform are unique from the ring chin-up to the bar chin-up. If we can see this as a new skill to learn, it's going to unlock a new excitement, a new novelty, and ultimately a new motivation moving forwards. So where's Abby now? Well, she is not at the ring muscle up, but she has made incredible inroads in the last 6 weeks, improving her chin-up from 1 rep on the rings and really really struggling for that, and now making working sets of 4 to 5 repetitions. So really making inroads back towards that 8 repetitions that she was doing on the bar. Amazing job. Hopefully this video has inspired you to also do the same. Let me know in the comments how this was for you, and if you have any other questions that you'd like me to answer, I'm more than happy to do so. Thanks for watching, and keep figuring things out.